Disney's new DuckTales series is a show that strives to balance a new, unique identity with a reverence for what came before it. Every episode faces the incredible challenge of living up to the legacy of the original DuckTales without being burdened by it. At the same time, it needs to create new characters, evolve old ones, and ultimately tell its own story. Along the way, the show has gone the extra mile to incorporate other shows DuckTales fans might have loved into the new stories, including one particular fan-favorite show, Darkwing Duck. Because Launchpad McQuack was a character in both the original 1987 DuckTales and the 1991 Darkwing Duck TV series, bringing the terror that flaps in the night into the new DuckTales series is the perfect fit. And over the course of the last 3 seasons, the show has expanded the mythos of the new Darkwing from a TV series that Launchpad loved as a kid to a gritty superhero reboot movie to the humble origins of an actual superhero. Each one of these appearances of Darkwing would have been more than enough of a tribute to the series on its own, but DuckTales kept going, one-upping itself every chance it got, all leading up to a double-sized story featuring the new Darkwing Duck. So how does a modern twist on a classic Disney cartoon pay homage to its inspiration, double as a new origin story for another beloved Disney afternoon series, find a place for Launchpad in both of them, and push forward the larger plot of DuckTales Season 3, all without losing its own identity in the mix? It's time to find out.
Come on, you nerds! Let's get dangerous!
When the original 1987 DuckTales series ended, kids watching at the time probably didn't expect to see a lot more of Uncle Scrooge and his adventurous family. But in 1991, a new duck-based adventure show launched, along with a familiar face, Launchpad McQuack. The original Darkwing Duck series never did all that much to answer just how Launchpad McQuack wound up in a new city with a fixation on that town's local caped crime fighter. And although there's a little crossover between the shows and an official answer we'll talk about in a bit, continuity between DuckTales and Darkwing Duck was never really a priority. So just how did Launchpad go from working for Scrooge McDuck to being a partner to the hero of St. Canard? Disney's new DuckTales series has an answer, and it starts with one of McDuck Enterprises' research labs.
Dr. Bulba may be a bit unorthodox, but his lab is cutting edge. If he says he's onto something big, I trust him.
Uncle Scrooge is visiting the lab of Taurus Bulba to investigate a groundbreaking new project in St. Canard.
It promises to change the world.
This is really something. What is this exactly?
Bulba says it's called the Ramrod, or Reality Altering Mechanism, and it's a device that can apparently make anything seemingly out of thin air.
What's your favorite food?
Pizza! Haggis?
I heard haggis.
Tastes like socks and bitter regret. That's how you know it's haggis.
While Scrooge is in St. Canard checking in on his investment, Launchpad and Dewey take the opportunity to visit an old friend, Drake Mallard, who is now living in an abandoned bridge tower as Darkwing Duck.
Drake!
Oh, hey, I'll help you.
This is amazing! First you loved Darkwing, then you played Darkwing, now you are Darkwing!
Darkwing's hideout is packed with everything a hero could want. A crime-fighting supercomputer, scaffolding to make dramatic entrances from, a heroically themed motorcycle, alternate costumes, and more. Apparently, it was Fenton Crackshell Crabera who helped set Darkwing up with all the new gizmos in his lab. And the whole scene is a fun reveal, but it wastes no time moving the plot along. Despite setting up in a city with one of the world's highest crime rates, Darkwing has found little crime to actually fight, thanks to the effort of St. Canard's new mayor, Zan Alson.
Computer, crimes. Where are they?
Displaying map of St. Canard.
There's no crimes. St. Canard is supposed to be the supervillain capital of the world.
Not since the new mayor took charge and cleaned up the place.
Darkwing, Dewey, and Launchpad head out into the city anyway to try and find some criminal activity, but ultimately come up short. At least until they see a young girl sneaking into Taurus Bulba's lab. This is Gosling Waddlemeyer, the girl who eventually becomes Darkwing's adopted daughter in the original 1991 series. But right now, she's just a kid trying to solve the mystery of how her grandfather disappeared. Unfortunately, chasing her away from the lab helped Darkwing earn recognition as a hero. He was given the key to the city and everything. So when Gosling tells Darkwing that Taurus Bulba might actually be a bad guy, and behind the disappearance of her grandfather, the hero is reluctant to believe her.
You kicked me in the face!
You stopped me from exposing Bulba.
Fortunately, there's another kid in Darkwing's tower that has experience searching for a missing parent. And between Dewey and Launchpad, Darkwing is convinced to put aside his doubts and look into Gosling's story.
Bulba believes in me. The city needs me.
Yeah, and so does she. You want to make a difference, right?
Gosling isn't the only one asking questions about Bulba's intentions either. Huey doesn't understand how the Ramrod works, and is determined to find out.
How? How can you make something from nothing? Where does the stuff the Ramrod makes come from? Is it connected to those accidents you've been having?
Feels like more than one question.
The answer is, you can't. After some convincing, Bulba lets Huey, Louie, and Scrooge look at the plans for the Ramrod. And somewhere between the technical documents and a missing mystery Huey found in Isabella Finch's journal, Huey finds out the answer. Multiverse theory.
The Ramrod doesn't create items from nothing. It sucks them in from other dimensions.
This has way bigger implications than this plot alone, but we'll get to that in a minute. For now, it's enough to say that this is something Gosling already knew. And when Darkwing and Gosling and Launchpad confront Bulba with the truth, he shows his true colors. Taurus Bulba tossed Gosling's grandfather into another dimension, and he has no qualms doing the same to Darkwing and his friends. This leads into our first true scene in DuckTales of Darkwing Duck in action, like successfully in action, fighting off Taurus Bulba, leaping to the rescue of Gosling after countless scenes of failure. It's awesome to see it all come together for him. To see Gosling chipping in, it's like she's the piece of the crime-fighting puzzle he was missing.
Okay, that was pretty cool.
This is already a pretty great plot for a Darkwing Duck storyline. It's a decently streamlined, modern retelling of the pilot episode from the 1991 original series, with almost all the same major players. It establishes a baseline for how Launchpad, Gosling, and Darkwing team up, uncovering a mystery behind Professor Waddle-Miler's disappearance, and stopping Taurus Bulba from abusing a powerful device for his own means. But don't let that fool you into thinking this is a direct adaptation of that original story. This is DuckTales, and DuckTales takes things to the next level. If there are unlimited universes with unlimited possibilities, that means that all fictional stories could be derived from other actual universes, being true in a sense. And in the world of DuckTales, that seems to be how it works. Taurus Bulba uses the Ramrod to open a portal to a universe that aligns with the Darkwing Duck TV show that Launchpad and Drake grew up watching, calling out real, superpowered villains to help him overthrow St. Canard and defeat Darkwing Duck.
Introducing the Fearsome Four, guaranteed to destroy Darkwing Duck or your money back.
From here on, everything in this episode ramps up, but it's not all about Darkwing Duck. He may be the special guest star of this story, but this is still DuckTales, and Scrooge McDuck's family isn't about to take a back seat to Darkwing's story. You see, Taurus Bulba isn't working alone.
I hired you to crack the Salego circuit for FOWL's master plan, and instead you do all this? We're trying to rein in chaos, not create more of it.
Or at least he wasn't working alone. FOWL may have contracted Bulba to crack the multiverse open, but now that he has the power of the Ramrod, Bulba doesn't feel the need to obey Bradford's orders anymore, and he locks the buzzer director of the fiendish organization for world larceny up in the same prison he has Huey, Dewey, and Louie, who fortunately have a lot of experience escaping death traps.
You think this is hard? Try picking the lock on the bin. Not that I have.
You coming?
Yes, of course, because you are clearly rescuing me.
As the four of them search Bulba's laboratory for Uncle Scrooge, Bradford seems cautious. He's not a fan of big adventures.
Did you ever consider that not everything should be a fun adventure?
All the time, but no one listens, so it's no use.
And while trying to escape the situation, he accidentally reveals that he's the head of FOWL.
I knew it! You're a bad guy!
That depends on your point of view. Of course, from your point of view right now, yes, I definitely am.
And he quickly throws Huey, Dewey, and Louie into a very familiar-looking alternate dimension.
A sea monster ate my ice cream!
This might seem like a throwaway joke to one of the more memorable comedy bits from the original 1987 DuckTales, but it's actually really, really important. I'm gonna get back to this, I swear. But before we get to that, I want to talk about the real heart of this episode, the relationship between Gosling, Darkwing, and Launchpad. They need to find a way back into the lab that is now guarded by supervillains.
Bulba's lab is on lockdown. What are we supposed to do? Beat up a supervillain and make him let us in?
Now that's a superhero idea. Let's do that.
Well, this is a great setup to give our team of heroes an excuse to run through a series of action sequences with classic Darkwing Duck supervillains. The real star of these scenes is how quickly and how well it endears these characters to each other. Like DuckTales, at its core, the original Darkwing Duck series was a show about a found family. And the story of how they find each other is what drives this story, too.
Gosling, you're the Dewey. Lucky, Darkwing, you're the Launchpad. And I'll be the single most important member of the family, the Uncle. Bless me, bagpipes. For
Launchpad, who's been part of a family of adventurers for a while now, this all seems obvious. But Darkwing and Gosling have a little more trouble falling into their new roles. As they chase supervillains throughout the city, the two keep fighting each other. Darkwing, frustrated with Gosling for continuously rushing into danger, and Gosling, frustrated at the hero for seemingly holding her back and not fighting hard enough to find her missing grandfather.
Young lady.
Young lady?
If you're fighting crime under my roof and using my smoke bombs, you will play by my rules.
You're not my family.
For a few scenes, something almost seems off with Darkwing. You're almost inclined to agree with Gosling that he's being a coward or not working hard enough to help her. You're almost ready to ask, as Goz is, why Darkwing isn't stepping up and being a real hero. The thing is, he is, but you just can't see it because Gosling can't see it. As the episode goes on, you slowly realize how much of the story is told from Gosling's point of view. I love the way this works, because DuckTales has already done so much legwork establishing Launchpad and Drake's relationship, as well as Darkwing Duck's backstory. This episode can pull focus away from them and focus in on Gosling's story almost exclusively. It allows us to dwell on her frustration with Darkwing, seeing him a little bit more as a stranger. Because while we know who Darkwing Duck is, Gosling doesn't. And that's what makes this work. Most of the major Darkwing scenes in this episode are told from Gosling's point of view, to the point where that if she doesn't know something, we don't know it either. When she's at her peak frustration with the hero, Launchpad reveals to both her and the viewer that he really is being the hero as he's supposed to be. And he's not giving up until he finds her grandfather again.
Look, I know I'm being hard on him, okay? I need to find my grandpa.
Of course, which is why DW hasn't slept in days.
What?
When Gosling finally understands how hard Darkwing has been working, she starts to come around to his perspective, trying to protect her. This Darkwing Duck may have created his superhero identity based on an old TV show, but this isn't TV. This is actually dangerous, and she starts to get scared.
It's real life where there's real danger.
Yeah, and sometimes you lose, but it's what you do when things are hard that makes you a hero.
At long last, the three of them are finally working together as a team, and they're all on the same page. They're ready to save the day, no matter the odds.
You're an actor and a Launchpad. How are you gonna stop 4 supervillains?
Well, technically Bushroot isn't really a villain, per se.
That's right! I keep forgetting you're nerds!
In an action-packed finale, Launchpad and Darkwing fend off the supervillains, while Gosling manages to free Scrooge and the boys from the alternate dimension they were trapped in. But she can't find her grandfather. In the end, she has to destroy the machine before it destroys the world, sucking the supervillains back into their own reality, but leaving her alone and orphaned. Bradford escapes, Scrooge learns about FOWL, and the hero's victory hangs under a dim shadow.
Our reality just got a lot more dangerous.
Like in the original Darkwing Duck, it's a sad ending for Gosling, but it's also a new beginning for her. She may have lost her grandfather, but that doesn't mean she doesn't have any family at all.
I was wondering if you wanted to be my crime-fighting partner?
Really?
Go to them.
Ah! I'm coming too!
In a way, it's a lot like the origin of Darkwing's family in the original 1991 show. A little bitter, but still wholesome and sweet in the end. There is, however, a big key difference. In this version of the story, Launchpad is still very much a part of Scrooge McDuck's world. And now, he has another family of adventurers to be a part of too.
I'll spend my days in Duckburg, nights in St. Canard, and I'll sleep on the drive over. Uncle Launchpad is here to stay!
When I first saw the original 1991 Darkwing Duck series as a kid, I remember wondering how Launchpad wound up leaving Duckburg to come to St. Canard. It was never really important, but I wanted to know, and I wasn't the only one. Seeing a version of that story that reconciles Launchpad's roles on both series was a ton of fun, and it more than fulfilled my curiosity for how a story like that would play out. As much as I enjoyed that though, I also like how this episode indirectly addresses the difference between the two original shows, and turns something that was a minor controversy for some Disney Duck fans on its head. Here's what I mean. Back in 2016, Darkwing Duck creator Tad Stones mentioned in an interview that Darkwing Duck technically isn't a spin-off of DuckTales, despite sharing some characters. Fans try to connect the two realities, he said at the time, but explained that he doesn't consider them part of the same universe. This never seemed odd to me. There are a lot of different versions of Duck stories between comics and shows, and they don't necessarily follow each other. It makes sense to me that they aren't meant to be canon. But when Tad Stones first said that he considered DuckTales and Darkwing Duck different realities, some fans rebelled. I love that instead, the new DuckTales crew did the exact opposite, doubling down on Tad Stone's alternate universe explanation and integrating that into a new DuckTales story about multiple universes. Even going so far as to point out that the original 1987 DuckTales still exists as yet another alternate timeline. See? I told you I'd come back to that. In the grand scheme of the new DuckTales series, this is an extremely small thing. But for longtime fans of Disney Duck cartoons, it's a fun nod to that interview. On the other hand, it might not be a reference to that interview at all, and I just have an overactive imagination. Either way, I thought it was a lot of fun. The look back at the original DuckTales wasn't the only reference to other Disney afternoon shows either. While flipping through alternate universes and looking for her grandfather, Gosling stumbles across a universe of brightly colored dogs. They're actually from a 1986 Disney television special called Fluffy Dogs. It was supposed to be a pilot for a new show about these cute dog-like creatures from another dimension, but the series never made it to production. But still, I like how all that fits in. Transdimensional dogs? We see them in another dimension. Also, when Bushroot, Megavolt, the Liquidator, and Quackerjack are wreaking havoc on St. Canard, we see a Bobcat police officer caught up in their antics. Yeah, that's right. DuckTales brought bonkers back. Everything's on the table here. There's even a reference to a semi-obscure Disney afternoon comic, a story called The Legend of the Chaos God that appeared in Disney Adventures magazine. It was a giant crossover comic storyline between Chippendale's Rescue Rangers, Darkwing Duck, Tailspin, DuckTales, and even Goof Troop. And the main villain of that was called Salego.
It's Salego's Circuit! Salego was a mad thinker who believed that every story, every work of fiction was actually a window into an alternate dimension.
The DuckTales crew obviously put a ton of work and care into this episode, and it shows. Making this story work required laying the seeds as far back as season 1, and slowly dropping hints and expanding ideas until they were finally ready to put out a big Darkwing Duck storyline. It's a huge challenge, but they still pulled it off, putting together a story that echoes the original 1991 show's pilot well, but still evolves the story to match the new take on these characters. Despite how different Launchpad, Darkwing, and Gosling are in this new version, the core of each of their personalities still comes from the same place. That's a big feat too, because Darkwing Duck and DuckTales were originally very different shows. In 1991, Darkwing Duck was about as slapstick as Disney got, with a lot of physical humor that bordered on Looney Tunes level of wacky. Darkwing could really take punishment in that show. In this version, he's more grounded in reality, and while that physical comedy is still there, it's a little less over the top. And recontextualized is less of a gag, but more symbolic of a hero having to get back up again, no matter how many times he's knocked down. Most importantly though, is that despite doing all of this for Darkwing Duck, this episode doesn't lose its identity as DuckTales. Sure, this show is deep enough to be a backdoor pilot to pitch a new DW show to Disney, but it's also very much a story that moves forward the narrative of the DuckTales Season 3 storyline. In fact, it might be one of the most important FOWL-based episodes so far. And that is the true triumph of this episode. It's 100% Darkwing. It's 100% DuckTales. It's everything it needed to be, and more. What did you think about this giant double-sized episode of DuckTales? Do you think it's leading into a potential Darkwing Duck spin-off, or is it just the ultimate homage to the Disney afternoon? Let me know what you think in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more reviews in the future. Until next time though, thank you for watching. Sharing all my thoughts about this series with the fans has been a real pleasure, and I'm happy to be a part of this Duck revival, even if it's in this small way. So until next time, take it easy, Internet.